In a quiet suburban neighborhood, the Burton family was known for their strong bond and lively evenings together. They often spent time sharing stories, laughter, and meals Gary proudly cooked. That night was no exception, as the warmth of their home was filled with the sound of joyful chatter while they enjoyed dinner together. Just as the evening wound down, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Hope, their energetic 12-year-old, jumped up excitedly, brushing past her father and older brother to answer the door. She came back moments later with a puzzled look. "Dad, a police officer is here. He says he needs to talk to you," she announced. Gary's stomach tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm for the kids. Approaching the door, he was greeted by a state trooper. "Are you Gary Burton?" the officer asked. "Yes, I am," Gary replied, his voice steady but uncertain. "And you're Monica Burton's husband?" At Gary's nod, the trooper glanced at the dining area where the children sat, then said, "Could we speak privately, Mr. Burton?" Gary swallowed hard and turned to his kids. "Hope, Sean, go to your rooms. I need to talk to the officer alone." "But, Dad," they began to protest, but his firm tone stopped them. Now, surprised, they obeyed and left, casting nervous glances back at their father. Once they were alone, the officer began. "Mr. Burton, I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your wife's plane is missing and presumed to have gone down. It disappeared from radar tonight during its flight from Fort Lauderdale to Grand Cayman. A Coast Guard team is searching for survivors as we speak." Gary felt his legs weaken, but he managed to stay upright. Monica, a vice president at a large multinational company, had been on a work trip to the Caribbean. A routine flight she'd taken many times before. She had even called earlier to let him know her plans. Now, the unimaginable was happening. The officer explained further, but none of it reassured Gary. All he could think about was Monica, and the fact that her plane had vanished in shark-infested waters. After the officer left, Gary's children rushed back to him, their faces full of worry. "What's going on, Dad?" Hope asked. Her voice cracked, and Sean stood silently beside her, his eyes brimming with tears. Gary gathered them close, trying to console them as best he could, even though he was barely holding it together himself. That night, none of them could sleep. They huddled together in Gary's bed, waiting anxiously for a phone call that never came. Morning arrived with no answers. The Coast Guard called again, but the news was grim. No wreckage, no survivors, nothing but silence. Gary called the kids' school to explain their absence, then found them glued to the TV, watching the news coverage of the missing plane. He wasn't sure whether to let them keep watching, but didn't have the heart to turn it off. The phone rang constantly throughout the day. Monica's parents and Gary's own family were the first to call, trying to stay optimistic, though their voices betrayed their fear. Friends and co-workers followed, offering help but unsure of what to say. The hardest calls came from reporters, and after speaking to one for longer than he'd intended, Gary started screening his calls, answering only those from family and close friends. Neighbors began stopping by with casseroles and dishes, part of a Southern tradition meant to show care. At first, Gary was grateful. He barely had the energy to think about food. But soon, the sheer volume of offerings became a painful reminder of the loss he feared was coming. Days turned into an agonizing blur. Gary called the Coast Guard office in Fort Lauderdale every day, only to hear the same devastating updates. Finally, 5 days after the crash, they called with the worst news. Wreckage from Monica's plane had been found, but there were no survivors. "I'm sorry, sir," the officer said gently, "but we have to end our search and rescue efforts." Gary's world shattered. Somehow, he still had to tell Sean and Hope. Their sobs filled the house when he broke the news. And once they calmed down, Gary had to make a series of heartbreaking calls to family and friends, arranging a memorial service and preparing an obituary. The service came and went, a somber event that left Gary feeling hollow. Though the children returned to school, Gary struggled with the weight of new responsibilities. A friend suggested he consult a lawyer about the legal issues, and Gary was shocked to learn he'd need an official death certificate for Monica. But the plane crashed at sea. He protested. "I understand," the lawyer said, "but without a body, the court has to issue a statement. It won't take 7 years. Though cases like this are usually expedited." The lawyer assured him they'd handle the paperwork, including updates to bank accounts, mortgages, and insurance policies. Gary also had to inform Monica's company about her death, as well as speak with the widow of her colleague who'd been on the plane. He dreaded that call. Cindy, the other spouse, had been bracing for the same grim news. As they exchanged condolences, Gary realized she was the only one who truly understood the depth of his grief. Cindy looked at Gary with concern and asked, "How are you holding up?" "Gary? It's hard," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "I can't accept that Monica's gone. Everything around me reminds me of her. Sometimes I even think I see her in crowds." He glanced at the floor, overwhelmed by the weight of his grief. Cindy nodded empathetically, knowing there was little she could say to ease his pain. "And you, Cindy? How are you managing?" he asked after a pause. "It's not easy," she said, her voice steady but somber. "Luke and I didn't have kids, so it's different for me. Honestly, we weren't in a good place before all this. If he hadn't passed, we were probably headed for a divorce." Gary frowned slightly but spoke kindly. "I'm sorry to hear that. One moment. I feel relieved that I don't have to deal with the divorce." Cindy continued. "And the next. I feel guilty for not being more heartbroken. But a part of me still misses him." "Will you be okay financially?" Gary asked, concerned. "I'll manage," Cindy replied. "The company insured Luke's life, so I'll receive a double payout. But he made some bad investments, and we lost a lot of money." Gary wasn't surprised, recalling Luke's reckless tendencies. Cindy's mention of life insurance reminded him to follow up with Monica's benefits department. After a bit more conversation, Gary stood to leave. "Cindy, I have to go. Sean and Hope will be out of school soon, and I need to pick them up. Please keep in touch. If you need anything, or just someone to talk to, call me." When Gary returned home with the children, he was surprised to see an unfamiliar car parked outside, leading them through the garage. He barely had time to unlock the door before the doorbell rang. Outside stood a man in his 50s alongside a younger woman in professional attire. "Good afternoon," the man said. "I'm Special Agent Adam Bullock, and this is Special Agent Judy Snow. We're with the State Investigation Bureau. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your wife's disappearance." Hope clung tightly to her father's waist, her tears soaking his shirt. Gary's expression darkened. "What does that mean?" he asked sharply. Agent Snow stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. "I'm sorry if we upset your daughter, Mr. Burton. This is just a routine check related to your application for Mrs. Burton's death certificate. We can return another time if that's better. Gary patted Hope's shoulder gently. It's okay. Sweetheart. Nothing bad is happening. He coaxed her to wipe her tears with the napkin Agent Snow offered before sending her to her room to do homework. Turning back to the agents, he said firmly, "If this won't take long, let's get it over with." They moved into the living room and sat around the coffee table. Agent Bullitt began. "We need some background information about your wife. How long were you married?" "Since 1990. Right after we graduated from college," Gary replied, the memory of his wedding day and Monica's radiant smile fresh in his mind. "And she worked for the International Marketing Corporation until her disappearance?" Agent Snow asked. "Yes. She was the VP of Sales for the Southeastern U.S., Gary confirmed. "Why would she travel to the Bahamas?" Snow pressed. "The Southeastern region includes the Caribbean," Gary explained. "The company's headquarters for that area is in Grand Cayman. So she often flew there." "I noticed you referred to her as Monday. Was that her nickname?" Snow asked gently. "It was what I called her," Gary admitted, his voice faltering. Snow offered a small nod of understanding. "I know this is difficult, Mr. Burton." Agent Bullock changed the subject. "Did Monica normally pilot her own plane for work trips?" "She did," Gary said. "Her father was a pilot, and she earned her license at a young age. She preferred flying herself because it gave her flexibility with her schedule." "And what about you, Mr. Burton? What do you do?" Bullock asked. "I'm a stay-at-home dad," Gary said. "I used to be an aerospace engineer, but my company downsized 3 years ago. Monica's career was thriving, so we decided I'd take care of the household and kids." "How did that arrangement affect your relationship?" Bullock asked. Gary stiffened at the question. "What does that have to do with anything? This is routine," Snow said soothingly. "We need to understand all potential factors." Gary sighed, then continued. "It was a big adjustment, but it made sense for our family. Monica handled work, and I took care of Sean and Hope. It wasn't always easy. Her job kept her busy, but we were managing just fine." Bullock leaned forward. "Did you notice any changes in Monica's behavior before her disappearance?" "Not really," Gary said after a moment's thought. "She was under a lot of pressure in traveling more. But she told me she was in line for a promotion. It would have reduced her workload and come with a higher salary." "And were there any unusual changes in your finances?" Bullock asked. "No," Gary replied confidently. "I manage our accounts, and nothing seems out of the ordinary." Snow handed Gary her card. "Thank you, Mr. Burton. If you think of anything else, please don't hesitate to call." After they left, Gary checked on Sean and Hope, who were busy with homework. He was struck by how resilient they seemed, given everything they were going through. The next day, Gary visited Monica's office to discuss her benefits. The department head offered condolences and gave him a box of Monica's belongings, including a framed family photo. A financial specialist reviewed Monica's 401k with Gary and revealed it was much larger than expected due to her increased contributions. The specialist advised him to transfer the funds into his own IRA for easier management. Gary also learned about a significant insurance policy Monica had chosen, which would provide income for 4 years, paid annually to minimize taxes. The payment is contingent on receiving the death certificate, the specialist explained. After his meeting with the investigators, Gary felt confident the certificate would be issued soon. For the first time in days, A small wave of relief washed over him. He realized he wouldn't need to find a job immediately, giving him the time and space to focus on his children and their healing. A few days later, as Gary prepared dinner, the doorbell rang. Special Agent Snow stood on the porch and informed him. The investigation is complete, and the death certificate has been issued. Gary sighed in relief. But his moment of reprieve was shattered by Hope's panicked cry from the back of the house. "Daddy! Help me!" Gary rushed to her room. With Agent Snow following closely, Hope was staring at a large red stain on her jeans. "I'm bleeding. Daddy!" she cried. Gary froze, horrified. "What happened, Hope?" he asked, his voice trembling. Agent Snow stepped forward firmly. "Let me handle this," she said, gently pushing Gary toward the door. "Wait in the living room." 15 anxious minutes later, Judy emerged. "Hope is fine," she reassured Gary. "You need to go to the store and buy sanitary napkins. Get the smallest size." Gary started to protest. "But Hope, Sean," Judy cut him off. "I'll take care of Hope and explain things to Sean. Just go. And hurry back." On his way to the store, Gary realized what was happening. Hope was menstruating. He berated himself for not having talked to her about growing up. "Oh, Monica, I need you more than ever," he thought bitterly. When he got home, Judy met him at the door and took the package. "You did good, Daddy," she said with a reassuring smile, then disappeared into Hope's room. After 30 minutes, Judy returned, hugging Hope, who followed close behind. Gary knelt and embraced his daughter. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry I didn't talk to you about this earlier." Hope smiled shyly. "It's all right, Daddy. I just got scared. Judy explained it all to me. Now I know what to do." She held Judy's hand tightly, and Gary realized his daughter had found a new friend. He turned to Judy, gratitude evident in his voice. "Thank you. It's good you were here. I'm not great with girls." Judy smiled warmly. But their moment was interrupted by Sean. "Does this mean we won't have dinner tonight?" Hope shrieked indignantly. But Gary raised a hand to stop her. "Sean, if you talk to your sister like that again, you'll go to bed hungry. Now go wash your hands and set the table." Turning to Judy, he added, "Please join us for dinner." Judy hesitated, but Hope tugged her arm eagerly. "Please, Judy, stay." With a soft laugh, Judy agreed. During dinner, the kids bombarded her with questions about law enforcement. From whether she'd arrested anyone famous to what it was like to carry a gun. Gary found himself amused and relieved to see them momentarily coming out of their grief. After dinner, Gary offered Judy a cup of coffee. "You seem so comfortable with kids. Do you work with them often?" She nodded. "I come from a big family. 2 brothers and 3 sisters. I was the oldest. So I was like a second mom. That's why I knew what to do with Hope. I helped my sisters through puberty." Gary smiled. "I'm glad you were here. I wouldn't have known how to calm her." Judy's expression softened. "How are they coping with their mother's loss?" Gary sighed. "Hope is very clingy. And Sean is moody and withdrawn. I don't know if it's because of Monica's death or just his teenage years." Judy placed a hand on his arm. "You're doing a great job. It will take time for all of you." Standing, she added, "I've intruded long enough. I'd like to say goodbye to Hope and Sean." Judy hugged Hope. who walked with her arm around Judy's waist. Gary watched them, thinking how much Hope had bonded with her. A few days later, a package arrived for Hope containing a pink stuffed elephant and a note from Judy. Though puzzled by the choice, Gary noticed the toy quickly took a prominent spot on Hope's bed. "I guess she's still a little girl at heart," he admitted. He called Judy to thank her, and she seemed pleased. "Keep in touch," she said warmly. Weeks later, Sean's teacher called to discuss his recent behavior issues. Gary scheduled a meeting and decided not to tell Sean until he had more details. The next day, the teacher explained her concerns. "Sean's behavior has worsened over the past few months," she said. "At first, I didn't want to say anything because I know he's been through a lot. But it's getting worse. He's distracted, not doing homework, and not paying attention in class. If this continues, his grades will drop significantly." "How much of this is just being a teenager?" Gary asked. Worried, the teacher replied, "It's a difficult age, especially for boys. But I think his mother's death is affecting him more than he admits. You might want to consider seeing a psychologist." Gary thanked her and waited anxiously for Sean to finish gym class. Once they were home, he sent Hope to her room and took Sean to the master bedroom. Sean's eyes widened and his father's serious expression. Gary recounted the teacher's concerns. "What's going on, Sean? Why are you acting like this?" Sean muttered. "Just because." Gary pressed. "Don't you care about your grades?" Sean shrugged. "Not really." Frustrated, Gary tried to appeal to his emotions. "What would your mother think?" Sean's face darkened. "Who cares? She was a liar," he snapped. Shocked, Gary grabbed his son's shoulders. "Don't talk about your mother like that. How can you say that?" Sean's voice broke as he whispered, "I saw her with another man." Sean collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. Gary sat beside him, stunned but focused on comforting his son. "It's okay," he murmured, holding him close. When Sean calmed down, Gary asked gently, "Tell me what you saw." Sean hesitated, then began. "It was last fall. I forgot my homework and snuck back home. I heard Mom come in, and I hid. Then I heard a man's voice. They went to your room. And when I looked, they were on the bed." Gary felt numb, but he held Sean as he wept. "Why did she do that? Dad? How could she?" Sean cried. Gary struggled to find words. "Sometimes people make mistakes. It doesn't mean we stop loving them. Your mother loved you and Hope very much. Remember the good things about her." He stayed with Sean until he calmed down and made him promise not to tell Hope. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Gary grappled with his emotions. At first, he wanted to deny Sean's story, but he knew his son was too shaken to lie. The betrayal knotted him. How could Monica cheat on me? Who was the man? How long has it been going on? Losing her in the plane crash was devastating enough, but realizing he had lost her long before broke him even more. Unable to sleep, Gary went to the gym the next day, hoping exercise would distract him. But as he ran on the treadmill, his thoughts spiraled. How could she do that in our bed? Did she plan it around my gym schedule? How often did they meet? Each question deepened his misery. Returning home, Gary tried to act normal around the kids, but he was suffering. That evening, he noticed Judy's business card on the kitchen counter. Desperate for someone to talk to, he picked up the phone and called her. Judy was pleased to hear from Gary, but concerned when he said he needed to talk. Are Sean and Hope okay? She asked. They're fine. But I'm not. Gary admitted. Can we have lunch tomorrow? Judy agreed and suggested a quiet spot near her office. The next day, Gary arrived at the restaurant, visibly distressed. As soon as Judy saw him, she asked, "For heaven's sake, Gary, what's wrong?" He took a deep breath and began. "You asked for more information about Monica. I found out. She was cheating on me." His voice broke and tears welled in his eyes. Judy reached across the table, clasping his hands. "Gary, that's terrible. Tell me everything." He recounted the teacher's concerns about Sean, their conversation, and Sean's devastating revelation. Judy listened intently, her expression softening. "Poor Sean," she said. "No wonder he's struggling at school. Losing his mom and dealing with this must be overwhelming." She squeezed Gary's hands. "I can't imagine what you're going through. Did you notice any signs?" "No," Gary replied, shaking his head. "The husband is always the last to know. Our intimacy declined after her promotion. But I thought it was just job stress. She said things would get better. But they didn't. I have no answers. Who is he? How long did it last? Was she planning to leave me? Why did she do this to us?" His voice trailed off, heavy with despair. Judy held his hands firmly. "Gary, you may never get those answers. And with her gone, they don't matter anymore. You need to focus on your family and yourself." Gary nodded slowly. "I know you're right. But it hurts. I keep wondering when she stopped loving me." Judy's voice was gentle but firm. "Monica cared deeply about you and the kids. Remember? She took out maximum life insurance and maxed out her 401k to secure your future. She cared. Gary." He smiled faintly. "Thank you, Judy. I'll try to remember that." As they stood to leave, Gary noticed neither had touched their food. "I guess I'm not a great lunch company," he joked. Judy smiled. "Don't worry. Skipping a meal or two is probably good for me." Gary glanced at her and thought, "She looks good to me. Stay in touch, Gary," Judy said warmly. "Let me know if I can help." She kissed his cheek. And as she turned away, Gary thought he saw her blush. Back at home, he felt lighter for the first time in days. "I guess I really needed to talk it out," he mused. On Saturday, while cleaning storm debris in the yard, Gary noticed Hope chatting on the phone. He turned to Sean. "Did someone call?" Sean shook his head. "She's talking to her new best friend, Judy." Gary raised an eyebrow. "Does she call Judy a lot? And what's a BFF?" Sean sighed. "BFF means best friend forever, Dad." Hope looked up and grinned. "Daddy, can we take Judy to dinner?" "Let me talk to her first," Gary said, taking the phone. "Hi, Judy. Would you like to have dinner with us tonight?" She quickly agreed. And Gary smiled. "Great. See you around 6. Thanks. Thanks." Hanging up, he turned to Hope. "She's coming. Let's clean up so she doesn't think we live like pigs." Sean groaned. "Oh, Dad. Do I have to?" But he reluctantly started tidying up. Gary decided to make a special fish dish, which meant a trip to the grocery store. He selected a nice piece of salmon, picked up dessert, a bottle of wine, and a bouquet of flowers. I guess I'm going all out, he thought with a chuckle. Judy arrived promptly at 6. Greeted warmly by Hope. Even Sean managed to be polite, which surprised Gary. While Judy chatted with Hope and explored her room, Gary finished preparing dinner. The meal was a success. And Judy teased, "Oh, a man who can cook. Mother warned me about men like you." After dinner, Judy helped with the cleanup. With the kids occupied, she and Gary poured wine and moved to the living room. Dinner was wonderful. Judy said, "Thank you for inviting me." Gary smiled. "Hope wouldn't forgive me if I hadn't. She adores you." Judy laughed softly. "She's a wonderful girl and you're doing a great job." Her tone turned serious. "Gary, I have some confidential information to share." The GBI investigation into Monica's case was routine, and nothing unusual came up on her end. But Luke Avery, that's another story. Gary frowned, recalling what Cindy Avery had told him. Judy continued. IMC Security found major irregularities in the Southeastern Accounting Department, which Avery headed. They uncovered a fraudulent billing scheme that may have embezzled millions from the company, and Avery appears to have authorized it. "Poor Cindy," Gary commented. "She didn't deserve that." But Judy's revelation sparked a troubling thought. Could Avery have caused the crash to cover his tracks? What if Monica found out? Could he still be alive, hiding somewhere? Judy raised her hand. "Gary, you're getting carried away. The most likely explanation is still a tragic accident. We'll explore all possibilities, but don't jump to conclusions." Gary hesitated. "Do you think Monica was involved?" Judy shook her head. "It's unlikely. She had no signs of planning to abandon her family. Her finances were in perfect order, unlike Avery's. It's all just speculation. The only fact we know is that the plane crashed. Promise me you won't share this," Judy added firmly. "It could jeopardize the investigation and my job." Gary nodded. "I understand. And I promise. But why tell me?" Judy met his gaze. "You might hear something that could help. If you do, promise you'll tell me immediately. No Lone Rangers." "Gary." He smiled. "I promise. Besides, I enjoy our talks." Judy's smile lit up the room. When she said goodbye to Sean and Hope, Gary noticed Sean paused his game to say goodnight. A rare gesture. Hope walked Judy to the door, securing a promise that she'd call soon. Judy kissed Gary on the cheek before leaving. "She likes you, Dad," Hope said mischievously. Gary smiled. "I like her too," he replied, pulling Hope close. That night, as Gary lay in bed, his thoughts circled around Judy's revelations. "Oh, Monica," he thought. "What have you gotten yourself into?" Eventually, he fell into a restless sleep. A week later, while browsing sports news on his computer, Gary noticed the Facebook icon. On a whim, he clicked it. Gary rarely used Facebook except to monitor his children's activities. He insisted that Sean and Hope add him as a friend and share their passwords to encourage them to stay cautious online. As he scrolled through uninteresting content, Gary noticed a friend request from someone named Tom Pittman, a name he didn't recognize. There was no profile picture, just the default silhouette. Clicking on the name revealed little information. Everything was private, accessible only to friends. "Hey, Sean," Gary called out. "Do we know Tom Pittman?" Sean entered the room, shaking his head. No. He's been trying to make friends with me for weeks. I just delete his requests. Hope peeked in, adding, yeah. He tried to friend me too. He's just some creep on Facebook. Gary frowned. Uneasy. An unknown person trying to contact not just him but both his kids felt unsettling. You did the right thing. He reassured them. Never respond to strangers online. Still, the situation bothered him and an idea struck him. Maybe Judy can help us find out who this Pittman is. He picked up the phone and called her. Hi. Gary. Judy answered warmly. Hi. Judy. Can you come over? Something strange has come up and I need your help. Her tone shifted to concern. Sean and Hope are fine. Right? She asked. They're fine. Gary assured her. She promised to arrive within 45 minutes. Judy arrived exactly on time. Her appearance neat and professional. Gary greeted her. Impressed. You look great. Judy. You didn't need to dress up for us. He said with a smile. Thank you. Gary. I wanted to. She replied. Returning the smile. Gary called the children over. And Sean quickly logged into their accounts to show Judy the friend requests from Tom Pittman. Judy praised Sean's diligence in ignoring the requests and began examining the profile. But there was little to go on. The account is practically blank. Judy noted. Her expression thoughtful. No mutual friends. No posts. And the requests to all three of you? That's suspicious. Judy examined the Facebook requests and shrugged. It's probably a marketing ploy. She told them. Never share your information with strangers. Okay? The children nodded solemnly, taking her advice seriously. As it got dark, Gary suggested they go out for dinner and invited Judy to join them. The kids eagerly insisted. And Judy agreed. At the casual restaurant, Judy engaged the kids in conversation, asking about their favorite hobbies and school activities. Gary realized that Judy probably knew more about his children's lives than Monica had in recent years. The lively chat continued through dinner and the drive home. When they arrived, Judy followed them inside. The kids begged her to watch TV with them. But she declined gently. I need to talk to your dad, she said, leading Gary into the living room. Her tone shifted to seriousness. Gary, I don't think those Facebook requests were a marketing ploy. The Bureau has alerts about identity theft scams. But they don't usually target kids. Someone might be trying to get your family's information. Gary felt a chill run down his spine. Who could it be? And what do they want? Judy shook her head. I don't know. This doesn't fit any cyber fraud model I've seen. Gary frowned. What can we do? Should I close their accounts? Maybe keep them off the internet? Judy considered his suggestion for a moment. If they're careful and don't communicate with strangers or click on suspicious links, they should be okay. But I have a friend in the federal government who might help. He may not find Tom Pittman, but he could trace the account's location. I'll call him on Monday and let you know. With that, Judy stood and went to the children's rooms to say goodnight. When she returned, Gary walked her to the door. Before she opened it, he hugged her tightly. You've been like a guardian angel to us, he said sincerely. I don't know what we would have done without you. Judy looked into his eyes for a moment, then quickly kissed him on the lips. I don't know if I want to be an angel, she said with a wink. They don't have much fun. With a quick smile, she turned and walked to her car, leaving Gary standing there, bewildered. True to her word, Judy called Gary late Monday morning. Do you know anyone in Bark Park Dog Beach, Florida? She asked. Not a soul. Gary replied. Whoever Tom Pittman is. He created his Facebook account with a zip code starting with 334. That's somewhere in Bark Park Dog Beach County, she said. Gary shook his head. I can't imagine why someone in Bark Park Dog Beach would try to contact us. But at least he's not nearby. That's reassuring. I agree, Judy said. Besides, we've been tracking a lot of scams in South Florida. So maybe this really is some new kind of internet scam. Just make sure Sean and Hope stay away from these requests. Gary nodded. I will. Thank you, Judy. I feel so much better about the whole thing. I'm glad I could help. Gary, Judy replied, her tone warm. Despite what he told Judy, Gary wasn't reassured at all. On the contrary, he felt like his family was under constant attack. First, Monica's tragic death. Then Sean's revelation of her infidelity. Next came the unsettling news that Monica might have been involved in fraudulent dealings. And now an unknown person was trying to access his children's information. Gary decided to fight back. His first priority was to identify this mysterious person in Bark Park Dog Beach County. A quick internet search revealed that the county had a population of over 1.3 million people. Looking for Tom Pittman will be like finding a needle in a haystack, Gary muttered. Worse, he realized the name could easily be fake. Still, his mind continued to churn. An idea struck him. If he couldn't find Pittman, maybe he could get Pittman to find him. The chances are slim, he admitted. But that's all I've got. First, he needed to get Sean and Hope out of the way. Summer vacation was approaching, and that gave him an idea. He called Monica's parents. Would you and Dad like Sean and Hope to visit for a week? I'll need to go out of town during that time. And it would be a big help. Their grandfather happily agreed. And once the arrangements were finalized, Gary called the airline. I'd like to book a flight to Bark Park Dog Beach, he told the agent. When he shared the news with Sean and Hope, they were initially excited about visiting their grandparents, but grew apprehensive upon learning their father wouldn't be joining them. It would be the first time they'd been apart since Monica's death. Their hesitation tugged at Gary's heart. But he assured them everything would be fine. A week before their departure, doubts crept into Gary's mind. Am I doing the right thing? He wondered. But the thought of doing nothing felt worse. His unease was briefly interrupted by a phone call from Judy. How are you and the kids doing? She asked warmly. After a few minutes of conversation, her tone shifted slightly. I was wondering, would you like to get together next week? I haven't seen you or the kids in a while, she said, almost shyly. Gary hesitated, but managed a response. I'd love to, Judy, but I'm taking the kids to their grandparents. We'll be gone all week. Oh, Judy replied, sounding disappointed. I understand. Maybe another time. I'd like that very much, Gary said earnestly. Hanging up. He felt guilty for lying but told himself it was for the best. He knew what she'd say if she learned of his true plans. After dropping the kids off at their grandparents' home, Gary returned and immediately sat at the family computer. One of the reasons he'd sent the kids away was the absence of internet access at their grandparents' house, ensuring their safety while he carried out his plan. Logging into Hope's Facebook account, Gary found a friend request from Tom Pittman. He clicked accept and quickly received confirmation that the stranger was now friends with Hope. If nothing comes of this, I'll just unfriend him later, Gary thought. Next came the hardest part. Pretending to be a 12-year-old girl. He studied Hope's previous messages and decided he could imitate her style well enough. I may not fool her friends. He mused. But I hope I can fool Pittman. He crafted a casual first message. OMG. I'm going to Florida. My best friend Judy offered to take me with her. And my dad agreed. Flying out tomorrow. Gary hesitated briefly but then hit send. He hoped this would be enough to lure Pittman into a response. Now the bait is set. Gary thought. The next morning. He posted again. Spent the day at the beach. I'm going to be so tan. The following day. He added. Shopping tomorrow on Las Olas Boulevard and lunch at Taboo. So excited. With each post. Gary felt his tension grow but remained resolute. That evening. He packed a small bag and headed to F. Del Rel, determined to confront whoever was behind this. Soon Gary was settled in a seat for the 2-hour flight to Bark Park Dog Beach. Looking out the window. He remembered his only visit to the area years ago. He and Monica had driven through Bark Park Dog on their way back from their honeymoon in Fort Lauderdale Beach. Crossing the 17th Street Causeway and traveling down Southern Ocean Boulevard. Admiring the mansions overlooking the Atlantic. After landing, Gary rented a car and drove to a modest motel in West Bark Park Dog Beach where he had booked a room. Across the street was a fast food restaurant. So he grabbed a sandwich and soda and ate in his room while studying a map of the city on his laptop. Doubts lingered in his mind. But he hoped he was doing the right thing. The next morning, after a quick breakfast, Gary checked Hope's Facebook page. There were only a few envious replies from her classmates. But nothing from Tom Pittman. Though he hadn't expected immediate results. He hoped his fishing expedition might still yield something. Around 10 a.m., he got in his car and drove east over the Royal Park Bridge, turning south and then east again to Las Olas Boulevard. He wanted to arrive early and needed to park nearby in case he had to move quickly. After circling the block near the restaurant several times, Gary began to wonder if his plan had been a miscalculation. Suddenly, a car pulled out, and he slipped into the parking spot. After setting the meter, he walked down the street and noticed a shaded bench in front of the restaurant. Grateful, he took a seat, donned his baseball cap and sunglasses, and pulled out a copy of the Bark Park Dog Beach Post, pretending to read while scanning the street. As Gary sat there, he realized how flimsy his plan truly was. He had no idea if Tom Pittman had even seen the fake posts or would show up in response. Worse, he had no way to identify the person unless they somehow revealed themselves. All he could do was watch and hope for a suspicious figure to emerge. The crowd on the street was steady, and Gary tried to keep track of everyone passing by. His stomach rumbled as he watched diners enter the restaurant, cursing himself for not bringing something to eat. Time dragged on, and the restaurant began to empty. Checking his watch, he realized he'd been there for over an hour. What an idiot, he muttered to himself. I'd be no worse off if I'd stayed home. And at least I could have seen Judy again. As he scanned the street idly, a woman crossing caught his eye. Here I go again, he thought, irritated at himself for imagining Monica in a crowd of strangers. But as he watched her, something about her gait struck him. She looked nothing like Monica. This woman was a blonde with short hair, dressed in a style Monica would never wear. But the familiarity of her walk made his heart race. Impulsively, Gary stood and followed her. The blonde reached the corner and tried to hail a cab. Risking life and limb, Gary dashed across Las Olas Boulevard to his car. Just as he pulled out, he saw the woman climb into a cab that sped down the avenue. He followed. his pulse pounding. The cab turned onto Southern Ocean Boulevard, heading north. Gary tailed it at a safe distance. Finally, the cab turned onto a suburban street near Lake Sylvia and stopped in front of an elegant house facing the water. Gary parked a short distance away, his hands trembling. The woman paid the driver and walked toward the house. Despite her altered appearance, Gary was struck again by her gait. It has to be her, he thought, fury rising in his chest. Gary's mind raced. He remembered a book he'd read long ago, where an actor used pebbles in his shoes to change his walk to avoid recognition. It works the other way too, he thought bitterly. The more he watched, the more certain he became that this was Monica. Overwhelmed with anger and disbelief, Gary marched to the door and rang the bell. Crossing his arms, he waited. When the woman opened the door, her expression turned to shock. She hesitated, then shrieked, "Gary! What are you doing here?" Gary's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Hello, Monica. Funny to meet you here." As she opened her arms to hug him, he raised his hands sharply. "Don't touch me," he growled. His anger boiled over as he shouted, "How could you do this to me? How could you leave Sean and Hope?" Monica glanced nervously at the street, grabbed Gary's arm, and dragged him inside, slamming the door. "I did it all for you, baby. For you and the kids," she urged. "You have to believe me. It was the only way out." Gary's voice was ice. "What the hell are you talking about? None of this makes sense. Start explaining." Monica rubbed her hands together nervously, urging him to sit. "Please, Gary. Let me explain everything." Gary sat stiffly, his fury barely contained. "All right, Monica. I'm listening." Monica spoke quickly, her words tumbling out. "I was so close to something big. I had a coveted promotion in my grasp. But then the economy tanked. I thought if I could boost regional numbers, it would secure my promotion and save the company. Once I got it, we'd be on easy street. No worries about college for the kids. No worries about retirement. Nothing." Gary's voice cut through her monologue like a knife. "So it was all about money and your career?" Monica's hands dropped to her lap. "Luke Avery." Gary interjected coldly. Monica nodded, missing his tone. "Yes. He and I came up with a plan to move sales from big accounts into the current quarter. Every other region was reporting losses, but we showed a significant increase. The company was thrilled. We earned record bonuses." Her pride evaporated as her voice faltered. "But when the economy didn't recover, the numbers didn't add up. Luke told me it was only a matter of time before they figured it out. So you faked your death in a plane crash to cover your tracks," Gary said, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "That's right, kid," Monica said, as if Gary were her star pupil. "With enough money, it's not hard to arrange things. We had someone leave a Ribcraft motorboat with a GPS signal in the Caribbean. We just honed in on the signal and landed right next to it. So this whole thing was just a way to steal a lot of money and abandon your family?" Gary asked bitterly. "No, baby. No," she protested. "That's not it at all. I knew I'd have to get out of sight for a while. But I made sure you and the kids were okay. I took out life insurance and maxed out my 401k. You'd have plenty of money." She looked at him almost proudly. Gary's voice was cutting. "And you thought having enough money would make up for the loss of a wife and the mother of our children?" This time, she caught the bitterness in his tone. "No, baby. You don't understand. she insisted, her voice trembling. I was going to come back for you. For all of you. As soon as things settled down. I was going to contact you. We could go somewhere safe and be together again. Her eyes darted nervously around the room as she spoke. Gary's expression turned stony. You're only missing one thing, he said evenly. What is it? Baby? She asked, her voice hopeful. You forgot about having fun with Luke Avery, he said, his tone cold. Monica's face froze in fear. She quickly stood, holding her arms out to him. No, baby. It wasn't like that. Luke and I just worked together. We were never more than co-workers. Gary's voice rose. Don't lie to me, Monica. Sean saw you two together in our bedroom. She sighed deeply, her voice trembling. God. Did Sean see us? Oh. That's awful. A sob caught in her throat. But she straightened herself. It was just one time. Baby. He said he wouldn't help me unless I gave myself to him. But it was just one time. I swear. Gary stood abruptly, ignoring her. He looked around the room and called out loudly. Come out. Luke. I know you're here. No, baby. It's just me. It was just one time. Monica wailed. But her words were cut off as Luke Avery emerged from the bedroom. He was wearing a robe, his hands casually tucked into the pockets. Lay off. Monday. He knows. Avery muttered, clearly unfazed. Hearing Avery use Monica's favorite nickname made Gary wince. Monica began to cry. But Avery only scowled. He must have found us through Facebook. Avery grumbled. I warned you. But you just had to check on your kids. His tone shifted, becoming icy. But it doesn't matter now. We need to get out of here. Turning to Gary, he pulled a compact automatic rifle from his robe pocket and pointed it directly at him. As for you, bright boy, you're the only one who knows we're alive. Avery sneered. Looks like your kids are going to lose not only their daddy, but their mommy too. He chuckled darkly as he raised the weapon. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Came a voice from the hallway. All three turned in astonishment to see Judy Snow emerge. A Smith Wesson automatic trained on Avery. Before Avery could react, another voice rang out from behind him. Drop the weapon. Avery. It's over. Special Agent Adam Bullock stepped out of the kitchen, his gun leveled at Avery. The man glanced between the two agents, his hostility briefly flashing before his shoulders slumped. He dropped the weapon onto the carpet and slowly raised his hands. As Bullock kept him covered, Judy swiftly moved behind Avery. She twisted one of his arms behind his back and snapped handcuffs around his wrist before securing the other arm. She then turned to Monica, efficiently restraining her as well. Both fugitives lay on the floor as Bullock called the Bark Park Dog Beach Police Department and the local FBI office. Within minutes, the house was swarming with officers in uniform and plain clothes. Gary stood back, dumbfounded. As the chaos unfolded, Avery muttered angrily to himself, while Monica sobbed quietly. Neither of them glanced in Gary's direction as they were led away. Judy walked over to Bullock, hugged him, and kissed him on the cheek. Thank you for coming with me, partner. I owe you a great deal. Bullock smiled. No, you don't owe me anything. Solving this case will look good on both of us. With a nod, Bullock left. Judy turned to Gary, her expression unreadable. To his amazement, she walked over, threw her arms around his neck, and sobbed. You big idiot. Don't you ever do that to me again. You could have gotten yourself killed. Gary held her tightly until her tears subsided. Then gently pulled her back to look into her face. What are you doing here? How did you find me? He asked softly. Judy smiled through her tears. Hope called me to chat. When she told me you weren't with them at their grandparents', I suspected you were up to something reckless. I started making inquiries. When I saw Hope's Facebook posts, I called the airline and found out you'd booked a flight to Bark Park Dog Beach. I talked Adam into coming with me. And we've been following you since early this morning. She shook her head. We almost lost you when you took off after that cab. But Adam guessed which way you turned. Gary pulled her close again, holding her tightly. I guess you really are my guardian angel, he whispered, and kissed her. 2 years later, Gary adjusted the collar of his coat against the cold, damp wind blowing off Puget Sound. The air was heavy with humidity. But he smiled. It feels good to be here, he thought. The last 2 years had been a whirlwind of difficulties and changes. Discovering Monica was alive had been a terrible shock. But the aftermath was even harder for Sean and Hope. Her trial and conviction for fraud and other crimes brought the family into an uncomfortable media spotlight. The divorce had been a mere formality. Monica was no longer legally dead, but would spend the next 12 years in prison. To distance themselves from the painful memories, Gary decided to move the family across the country to Portland. The move was a fresh start. Their home in Birmingham sold quickly, and they found a cozy house in Portland that suited them perfectly. It was smaller than Monica would have tolerated, but Gary and the kids loved it. The children adjusted well, making friends at their new school. Gary stepped inside and grabbed his car keys, poking his head into the kitchen. He smiled at Judy. Come on, Angel. Let's go pick up the kids. Judy grinned happily, grabbing her coat. Let's go, she said, her voice full of warmth.